Northern Territory, Australia, the 17th of May, 1943. 14:22, the sound was wrong. It wasn't the clean, throaty roar of for Pratt and Whitney, our 1830, twin wasps in harmony. It was a scream, a stuttering, metallic cough, followed by a sound like a giant tearing a sheet of iron in half. Inside the cockpit of the B-24 Hotel Liberato dall'Indotti, Lieutenant Frank Gallo fought the yoke. The bomber, heavy with fuel and purpose, was dying. They were 200 miles from RAAF base Darwin, returning from a milk run to a Japanese observation post on Timor that had turned into a hornet's nest of fighters. Engine 3 is gone. Fire on 4. Sergeant Mike Stanos, the flight engineer, yelled over the intercom, his voice cracking. "Feather 4, feather it," Gallo roared, his knuckles white. The heavy bomber lurched, dropping 500 feet in a heartbeat. Below them was not the comforting blue of the Arafura Sea, but a vast, terrifying expanse of red and ochre, the Outback. It was an ocean of cracked earth, ghostly white gum trees, and shimmering heat that seemed to rise up and pull them down. "She's not responding. Skip, we're going in." The co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Al Brooklyn Russo, yelled. Gallo hit the alarm bell, briaring, "Brace, brace." The tail struck first. A rock outcrop, hidden by the spinifex grass, sheared the entire section off. The fuselage, now a 30-ton projectile, skipped once, plowing a trench 300 yards long before slamming to a halt against a termite mound as hard as concrete. Silence, then. The hiss of hot metal, the drip of fuel, the groan of stressed aluminum. Frank Gallo unbuckled, his head spinning. He tasted copper. He looked back. The radio room was gone. Just ... gone. Blue sky where the navigator should have been. Brooklyn. Russo was slumped over the shattered yoke. Still Stanos. "Anybody, sound off." A weak moan came from the forward turret. "BOS's, I think my legs broke." Gallo dragged himself from the pilot's seat. He saw Stanos trying to extinguish a small electrical fire with a blanket, his face a mask of blood. 4, maybe 5 of the 10-man crew were alive. They spilled out of the fractured cockpit onto the searing red dirt. The sun hit them like a physical blow. The air was 105 degrees Fahrenheit. The smell wasn't of battle. It was of dust, hot oil, and the sharp, ancient scent of eucalyptus. One of the survivors, the tail gunner, who had been thrown clear, pointed a shaking finger at the horizon. Where ... where the hell are we?" Frank Gallo looked around. In every direction, the world was the same. A flat, red line that met a pale, merciless sky. There was no water, no roads, no people. They hadn't just crashed. They had vanished. Kangaroo Creek Station, 90 miles southeast to 1423. Tom Kendrick was mending a fence line when he paused, wiping the sweat from his neck with a stained rag. He'd run Kangaroo Creek Stationer, 500,000 acres of unforgiving country, for 20 years. He was a man made of sinew and silence, his skin cured like leather by the sun. He heard it. It wasn't the sound of the crash, not at this distance. It was the absence of a sound. He often heard the high-altitude bombers' tiny silver crosses on their way north to fight a war that felt 1,000,000 miles away. This sound was different. It was the distinct drone of a lib, but it was too low, and it was laboring. Then it stopped. Not faded, but stopped. Tom squinted at the sky, his blue eyes sharp against the weathered copper of his face. He waited. Nothing, just the buzz of flies and the call of a distant galah. He pulled a crumpled notebook from his shirt pocket and made a mark with a pencil nub. He noted the time and the direction of the sound. West-northwest, towards the Arnhem Land escarpment. "Righto," he muttered to his Kelpie Dusty, who sat patiently in the shade of his battered utility truck. "Someone's having a bad day." He didn't know how bad, but he knew that land. He knew what the Red Ocean did to men. The military, with their maps and their grid squares, thought they could conquer it. Tom Kendrick knew the land didn't conquer, it just waited, and it swallowed everything. RAAF Base Darwin, Operations Room, the 18th of May 1943. 9 o'clock. The map covered an entire wall. It was a vast, Bayesian red canvas, depicting the top half of the Australian continent. Upon this map, a US Army Air Force's Colonel, Harlan Brandt, slammed his fist. "I am not accepting vanished as an answer, Group Captain," Brandt said, his voice tight. "I have a 10-man crew, a 30,000-pound asset, and a flight plan that says they should be right here." Group Captain Davies, RAAF, a man who had flown B-2CS in the last war, took a slow drag from his cigarette. "Colonel, with respect, your flight plan ends where the land begins. Right here," he gestured to the map, "is an area the size of your home state of Ohio. It has no roads, no towns, and, God willing, no Japanese. It is, for all intents and purposes, the bottom of the ocean." This was the central, brutal problem of the air war from northern Australia. Since the devastating raids on Darwin in '42, the top end had become a fortress. Tens of thousands of US airmen had poured in, operating from a string of hastily built airfields Fenton Long and the sprawling hub at Darwin. Their mission, to strike back at the Japanese presence in the Dutch East Indies, to bleed them in Timor, Ambon, and Rabaul. They were fighting two enemies. The first was the formidable Mitsubishi A6M0. The second, and far more lethal, was the land they flew over. The Northern Territory was a place of impossible scale. A single cattle station could be larger than Belgium. The terrain was a confusion of stone country, impenetrable scrub, and vast plains of sharp, head-high spinifex grass that could hide a city. In the wet season, it was an impassable swamp of mud and crocodiles. In the dry, which it was now, it was a blast furnace. A man without water would be delirious in 24 hours and dead in 48. A plane went down, and the search protocol began. It was a cold, mathematical process. Pilots flew grid patterns, their eyes scanning the endless red. But the Outback was a master of camouflage. The shimmering air, the Willy Willys dust devils, and the sheer monotony of the landscape made spotting a wreck, let alone a man, a 1 in a million chance. "We have 6 Catalinas flying coastal searches and 4 Beaufighters on an inland grid," Davies explained, his voice softening. "They're looking, but, Harlan, you and I both know the odds." Brandt stared at the map, at the red X that marked Darlin Dottie's last estimated position. He saw a map. He saw a tactical problem. He didn't see the flies. He didn't smell the iron-rich dust. He didn't feel the sun as a physical weight, pressing the life and moisture out of a man, one agonizing molecule at a time. He didn't understand that his men weren't just lost. They were being hunted by an enemy that had never lost a war. Crash site, Arnhem, land escarpment, -19, May 1943. 11:40 day 3. The world had shrunk to the shadow under the B-24's wing. It was 115 degrees outside that shadow, and not much cooler within it. The flies had found them. They came in a black, buzzing, persistent cloud, crawling into their eyes, noses, and mouths. "Gallo, ... You gotta do something." It was Sergeant Steinos. His face was swollen, his lips cracked open and bleeding. Frank Gallo stared at the radio set they had salvaged. It was dead. The batteries were cracked. "Water check," Gallo said, his own tongue thick as felt. The bombardier Henderson held up the last canteen. It was less than a quarter full. They had been rationing it, a single hot, metallic-tasting sip every 4 hours. Brooklyn Rousseau. "He's gone," Steinos whispered. The co-pilot had died the second night. They had buried him under a pile of rocks, a task that had cost them precious water and strength. The navigator and bombardier were badly injured, their legs broken. The tail gunner was delirious, muttering about a baseball game at Ebbets Field. "We heard a plane this morning," Henderson said, his voice a dry rasp. "I swear. High up. They're looking," Gallo said, trying to force conviction into his voice. "They're looking." He had tried everything. They'd fired their .45 caliber sidearms. They'd used the navigator's mirror to flash at the sky, a tiny pinprick of light swallowed by the immensity of the sun. They'd tried to light a fire, but the one-time-use survival flare had sputtered and died, and the surrounding scrub was too sparse to catch. Every attempt was a failure, a small ember of hope extinguished, leaving them darker than before. The desperation was a physical thing, a tightening in the chest that was worse than the thirst. They were elite airmen, masters of the sky, reduced to helpless infants by a landscape of red dirt. RAAF based Darwin -19, May 1943, 16 o'clock in the operations room. The mood was funereal. "Nothing, sir," a young RAAF pilot reported, peeling off his flight helmet. "We flew grid 12B all day. Saw a million roos, and a lot of... well, nothing. If they're there, they're not visible." Colonel Brandt looked at the clock. 52 hours. The survival manuals gave them 48, tops. "Call off the inland search," Brandt said, his voice dead. "Keep the Catalinas on the coast for another 24, just in case they made it to water. But the inland, it's over." The flight surgeon nodded grimly. The RAAF officers looked at their boots. It was the routine. A plane was lost. A search was mounted. Nothing was found. A telegram was sent. The war moved on. The machine had failed. The maps, the grid patterns, the powerful engines of the search planes all outfit was useless. They were looking at the Outback with the logic of a city, and 90 miles away, under a metal wing. Frank Gallo watched the sun begin to set, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. He knew no one was coming. He laid his pistol on his lap. He wasn't sure if he was keeping it to fight off dingoes, or for one last act of control. "God help us," he whispered to the buzzing flies. Tom Kendrick's homestead was not a house. It was a fortress against the heat. Wide verandas, a corrugated iron roof painted white, and a large, murky water tank. It was from this veranda, sitting in a battered wicker chair, that he'd spent the last 2 days. Watching, he wasn't watching the sky. He was watching the land. Tom Kendrick was not an educated man in the traditional sense. He'd left school at 13, but he held a doctorate in this specific 500,000-acre patch of earth. He knew its moods, its secrets. He knew where the water was, not just the big water holes, but the little soaks hidden under flat rocks. He knew the habits of the eagles, and he knew the smell of the air before a gully washer rain. His greatest education, however, had come from the local Aboriginal people, the Miali. He had grown up with them, worked his cattle with them, and, unlike most Balonda white men, he had listened. His 2 best stockmen, Jackie Jungarai and Albert Bararawanga, were sitting with him. They were men of few words, their faces as ancient and expressive as the land itself. "That plain boss," Jackie said, not as a question, but a statement. "He's over by the stone country." Tom nodded, tapping his pipe against the heel of his boot. "Reckon so. That wind shear off the She'd have pushed M. He'd heard the search planes. He'd watched them through his old Boer War binoculars. They were flying perfect, neat, military grids, and they were flying them 50 miles too far east. "They're looking with maps," Tom said, mostly to himself. "Not with their eyes." The military saw the Outback as an obstacle, a blank space between point A and point B. Tom Kendrick saw it as a living thing, a system. He knew that where the search planes were looking, there was no surface water for 100 miles. A pilot, if he survived a crash, wouldn't walk away from the escarpment. He'd walk towards it. The escarpment, for all its menace, was where shade and rock soaks were. The spark wasn't a eureka moment, it was a slow burn of frustration, a dawning, dreadful certainty. "They're alive," he said. Albert, who had been carving a piece of wood, looked up. His eyes were sharp, still alive. But shadow getting long for them. Tom stood up. The decision was made. The military, with all its power, was failing. They were using the wrong tools. They were trying to solve a problem of the land with a machine of the sky. "Right," Tom said, clamping his hat on his head. "Dusty, in the truck. Jackie, Albert, ... find your swags. We're going for a drive." He was a farmer, a civilian. He had cattle to move, and fences to mend. But he was also a man who couldn't abide a job done poorly, especially when lives were on the line. He, Jackie, and Albert were the unlikely minds the situation demanded. Their innovation wasn't steel, it was knowledge, ancient hard-won, and utterly foreign to the men in the operations room, us. Army Air Forces, 5th Air Force Liaison Office. Catherine, the 20th of May, 1943, 7:15. The town of Catherine was a dusty, fly-blown collection of tin-roofed buildings, now overrun with American G, IS and R, AAF, ground crews. Tom Kendrick's truck, a 1938 Ford V8 Ute, rattled to a stop outside a corrugated iron shed with a US flag hanging limply from a pole. Inside, a young captain from New Jersey, name of Pasternak, was sweating over a pile of requisitions. The air was thick with the smell of damp paper and stale coffee. Tom, flanked by Jackie and Albert, stood in the doorway. The three men, coated in red dust, their Acubra hats in their hands, looked like something from another century. "Mornin'," Tom said. "I'm Tom Kendrick, Kangaroo Creek Station. I'm here about your missing plane." Pasternak looked up, annoyed. "The search has been officially scaled back, sir. It's a tragedy, but you're looking in the wrong place," Tom said, cutting him off. His voice was quiet, but it had the density of a rock. "You're flying grids east of the Roper. That wind shear, plus the drag from 2 dead engines, they'd be west. They'd be up against the escarpment in the Stone Country." Pasternak sighed. He got this all the time. Bush, mystics, dowsers, old-timers with a hunch. "Mr. Kendrick, our flight engineers and meteorologists calculated the probable ... double quotes. Your meteorologists are in an office in Darwin," Tom said. "I was under the sky they fell out of. I'm telling you where they are, and I'm going to go get them." Jackie and Albert stood perfectly still, their presence making the young American captain deeply uncomfortable. "Go get them," Pasternak scoffed. "Just like that. We have aerial reconnaissance, radio direction finding. What, exactly, do you have?" "I've got this," Tom said, tapping his temple. "And I've got them." He nodded to his trackers. "They can follow a snake over solid rock. I reckon they can find a 30-ton aeroplane." The clash was immediate. It was the new world of technology, of manuals and regulations, colliding with the ancient world of instinct and observation. "Sir, I appreciate your ... local enthusiasm. But I can't authorize a civilian." And double quotes. He glanced at Jackie and Albert. ... a civilian excursion into a restricted military zone. "I'm not asking for your authorization, son," Tom said, his patience snapping. "I'm telling you, I'm going. My station borders that country. What I need from you is water, fuel, and medical supplies. Or are you going to let those boys cook in the sun because it's not in your manual?" The captain stiffened, offended. "I am not letting them then help me." The stalemate was thick. Pasternak saw 3 dusty, unkempt men. Tom saw a boy in a clean shirt who was about to sign a death warrant out of sheer stubbornness. "Look," Tom said, changing tactics. He pulled his crumpled notebook from his pocket. "Here. Las 2:23 de la tarde, May 17th. Sound of a Libyan laboring. 2 engines, maybe 3. Lost the sound at 14:24. Wind was 10 knots from the southeast. Your planes are searching with the wind. They'd have been pushed against it. They're west, I'm as sure of it as I'm standing here." Pasternak looked at the notebook. It was meticulous. He looked at Tom's eyes. He saw no madness, just a terrifying, focused certainty. "I can't give you military assets," Pasternak said finally, his voice weak. "I'll be court-martialed. I don't want your assets. I've got my truck. I want what's in your stores. Water purification tablets, quinine, sulfur powder, bandages, and for jerry cans of petrol. You can call it lost in inventory." Pasternak hesitated, then made a decision. He was supposed to follow the rules, but the rules had already failed. He walked to a locker. "I'm going to go use the latrine. I might be ... 10 minutes. Don single, quote, T ... touch. Anything on my desk." He stared at Tom, who nodded slowly. When Captain Pasternak returned, the 3 men were gone. So were 2 canvas medical kits, a crate of rations, and 4 cans of fuel. The prototype was not a thing of steel. It was a mission, an improvisation. It was Tom Kendrick's truck, loaded with a unique combination of 20th century supplies and Stone Age knowledge. Kangaroo Creek Station, -20, May 1943. 11 o'clock, Tom, Jackie, and Albert worked with the focused, silent economy of men who had done this 100 times before. This was not a search. This was a walkabout with a purpose. First, the truck. The 1938 Ford was already a masterpiece of field modification. It had heavy-duty shock absorbers scavenged from a wrecked Bren gun carrier, and its tires were thick, scarred, and overinflated to handle the sharp rocks. Into the truck bed went the tools. Water, the most critical, not just canteens. They loaded 3 massive 20-gallon canvas water bags. The bags were designed to leak slowly, the evaporation cooling the water inside, keeping it chilled and potable even in 100-degree heat. The smell was of damp earth and canvas. Supplies, the American rations, were stacked next to bush tucker. Slabs of Tom's own dried beef jerky, bags of flour to make damper bush bread, and a large tin of black tea and sugar. Materials: 2 shovels, an axe, 3 spare tires, and a thick coil of rope. Tom threw in a heavy tarpaulin. For shade, he grunted. The innovation Jackie and Albert added their own kit. They carried nothing but a small dilly bag, a water skin, and their Woomera spear thrower and spears. To the GIS, they looked like primitives. To Tom, they were the mission's most advanced technical asset. They weren't just loading a truck. They were balancing an equation. Every pound of food was a pound less water. Every tool was a calculation against the petrol needed to carry it. A setback came before they even left. Tom, checking the radiator, found a small leak. "Blast it," he hissed. Albert wordlessly walked to a nearby termite mound, chipped off a handful of the clay-like substance, and mixed it with water from his skin. He pushed the resulting paste into the crack. "Good for an hour," Albert said. Tom nodded. "Ours all will need to get to the creek bed." They set off, not west, but north. Tom was driving, his hands light on the wheel, letting the truck feel the ground rather than fighting it. He wasn't following a road, he was following the land. He drove along dry, sandy creek beds, the bush highways that maps never showed. The sound was a low rumble, the crunch of sand and gravel under the tires, and the tink-tink-tink of stones hitting the undercarriage. The air in the cab was a 120-degree oven, smelling of hot vinyl, petrol, and red dust that coated their throats. After 3 hours, Tom stopped the truck at the base of a huge rock wall. "The escarpment. This is it," he said, killing the engine. The silence that rushed in was deafening, broken only by the pinging of the cooling engine block. "Truck goes no further. From here we walk." They were now the prototype. 3 men, a canvas tarp, and 10,000 years of knowledge. Arnhem, Land Escarpment, -20, May 1943. 1530, the world became a furnace of baked stone. The heat radiated from the rock, turning the air into a shimmering, visible thing. Tom, Jackie, and Albert moved across the plateau. Not fast, but with a steady, ground-eating pace. Tom and Albert carried the heavy water bags and medical gear. Jackie walked ahead, his body loose, his head down, reading the ground. To Tom, the landscape was a reddened brown blur. To Jackie, it was a newspaper. They'd been walking for 2 hours. Nothing. The scale of the place was soul-crushing. A single high-walled canyon could hide a fleet of bombers. "Nothing here, boss," Jackie said, his voice flat. "This ground, no one been here." Tom stopped, pulling his canteen. He didn't drink, just wet his lips. The military search planes were gone. The silence was absolute. Doubt began to creep in. Had he been wrong? Had he dragged his men out here, on a fool's errand, to die with the Americans? Tom. It was Albert. He was 50 yards away, standing by a scrubby bush. He didn't point, he just looked. Tom and Jackie moved to him. Albert was staring at the ground. Tom looked. He saw red dirt and stones. "What is it?" Tom asked. Albert knelt. He brushed aside a single dry leaf. Underneath was a mark, barely an indentation. It was a partial boot print, a clean, machine-made heel. "American issue, Tom's heart hammered his ribs. Jackie knelt beside it. One man. Dragon, 1 foot. He pointed, not at the print, but at a tiny, scuffed pebble 10 feet away. He slip here. He's hurt. And, ... thirsty. How can you tell he's thirsty? Tom asked. Walks heavy, Jackie said, as if it were obvious. No spring. He's looking for shade. Jackie stood and pointed northeast, towards a cleft in the rock wall. He went there. This was the moment. The first test. The military's grid search, with its powerful engines and binoculars, had found nothing. Jackie Jungarai, with his eyes alone, had found a single scuffed pebble, and from it, read the story of a man's life. The prototype worked. How long ago? Tom asked. Yesterday, Jackie said, before the sun was high. They're close. Jackie pointed to a different set of marks. Fainter. 2 more. 1. They carry him. The suspense was a tangible thing, a metallic taste in Tom's mouth. The race was on. The sun was their enemy. The clock was ticking. Let's go, Tom said. Fast as we can. Crash site, Arnhem Land, escarpment, the 20th of May, 1943, 1705. Day 4, Lieutenant Frank Gallo was sitting against the hot aluminum fuselage, his .45 in his lap. He was past thirst, past hunger. He was in a grey, buzzing fog. Stanos was unconscious. Henderson, the bombardier, was rocking back and forth, muttering. The 2 other survivors were lying under the wing, unmoving. The sun had finally begun its merciful descent, but the heat from the rocks would last deep into the night. It was over. They had failed. The search had failed. Gallo heard a noise. A scrape. Scrape, ... scrape. He raised the pistol. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. A dingo, he thought, or a hallucination. Scrape, ... crunch. Frank Henderson whispered, his eyes wide with fear. What is that? A shadow fell over them. Gallo looked up. 3 figures stood at the edge of the wreckage, silhouetted against the blood-orange sky. They didn't look like soldiers. They were covered in red dust. One was a white man in a battered hat. The other 2 were dark-skinned, holding ... spears. This is it, Gallo thought. I'm dead. These are angels, or devils. The white man moved first, walking slowly towards them. He wasn't a vision, he was real. He had lines on his face, and his eyes were the color of the sky. G'day, Tom Kendrick said, his voice a low, calm rumble. Frank Gallo just stared. He tried to speak, but only a dry croak came out. Reckon you boys have had a rough trot, Tom said. He unslung the heavy canvas water bag and pulled the wooden stopper. The sound of it was the most beautiful sound Gallo had ever heard. Tom knelt by Stano's first, Jackie, the medical kit. Jackie was already there, opening the pack. Albert, meanwhile, was assessing the other 2 men. Tom held the bag to Stanos's cracked lips. Small sips, son. Just small sips. That's it. The water was cool, earthy and sweet. It was life. Gallo dropped the pistol and just wept. He made no sound, but tears cut clean paths through the grime on his face. My name's Tom Kendrick. This is Jackie and Albert. We've come from Kangaroo Creek. Gallo, the pilot choked out. Frank, Gallo, Darlin, Dottie. How did you find us? The planes. They stopped. Planes were looking in the wrong spot, Tom said, moving to Gallo. Offering the water, we didn't look. We tracked. The next hour was a blur of focused, quiet action. The enemy, the sun, the dehydration, the disbarred, was in full retreat. Tom and Jackie were terrifyingly efficient. They checked the 2 unconscious men. One was gone. The other, the tail gunner, was breathing shallowly. We gotta cool him, Tom said. He soaked a rag in water and laid it on the gunner's forehead. Jackie, meanwhile, was examining the bombardier's leg. It was a bad break, the bone clearly visible. Sulfur, Tom ordered. Jackie tore open a packet of the American sulfur powder and poured it directly into the wound. The man screamed, a thin, reedy sound, and passed out. That's for the best, Tom muttered. He and Albert quickly splinted the leg, using 2 broken pieces of the bomber's bulkhead and strips of a parachute. The entire rescue was conducted in near silence. It was not the frantic, shouting drama of a battlefield. It was the quiet, competent work of men who understood the land. They lit a small, smokeless fire with dry wood had gathered. They boiled a billiken of water and laced it with sugar and tea. "Drink this, all of it," Tom commanded the survivors. The hot, sweet tea hit their systems like an adrenaline shot, shocking their bodies out of lethargy. The sun was gone now. The stars in the outback sky were not faint pinpricks. They were brilliant, blazing diamonds. "Right," Tom said, looking at the survivors. Gallo, Stanos, Henderson, and the tail gunner. 4 of 10. Trucks, 5 miles back. "We can't move the injured men in the dark. The rock country's too rough. We wait for dawn. We won't last another day," Gallo whispered, the despair creeping back. "You will," Tom said, his voice an iron promise. "We're here now. We'll get you out." He looked at Jackie and Albert, who were sitting by the fire, quiet and watchful. The real trial wasn't just finding them. It was keeping them alive until they could be moved. The combat had just begun. RAAF, Base Darwin. Operations Room -21, May 1943. 15 o'clock, Colonel Harlan Brandt was initialing a stack of after-action reports when Captain Pasternak burst into the room, his face pale. "Colonel, you need to see this." Brandt followed him outside. The entire base was standing still, staring at the main gate. Tom Kendrick's Ford Ute, caked in so much red dust it was barely recognizable, rattled to a stop. In the back, covered by the tarp, were 4 men. Medics, alerted by the gate guards, were already running with stretchers. Colonel Brandt walked, then ran, to the truck. He saw Tom Kendrick, looking 10 years older, slide out from the driver's seat. "Mr. Kendrick." Then he saw the men in the back. They were in bad shape, but they were alive. He recognized Gallo, my God, Brandt whispered. He was a hardened officer. He had seen men die. He had never, he realized, seen a resurrection. We called off the search," Brandt said, stunned. "We flew over that grid for 3 days." Tom pulled his hat off, slapping the dust from it. "You flew over the wrong grid, Colonel. This is your crew. 4 of them, Lieutenant Gallo, Sergeant Stanos, 2 others. The rest, ... double quotes. He shook his head. The domino effect was instantaneous. The story ripped through the base, then through the entire 5th Air Force Command. A civilian farmer, with 2 Aboriginal trackers, had walked into the Red Ocean and pulled out 4 men who were, by every military calculation, already dead. The skepticism Tom had faced from Captain Pasternak evaporated. It was replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated awe. Colonel Brandt's office, -22 May 1943. 10 o'clock, tell me again, Brandt said, pushing a cup of coffee toward Tom. Jackie and Albert sat by the window, refusing the chairs, watching the airfield with detached interest. "It's like I told the captain," Tom said. "You're looking for M with machines. The machines are good, but they can't see, they can't read. Read the land." "Jackie here," Tom nodded. He read it. Found a boot print, found a scuffed rock. Found them. Brandt stared at the 2 Aboriginal men. To him, they had been part of the landscape, like the kangaroos. He suddenly, and jarringly, realized his mistake. They were the machines he needed. Excerpt from a fictional but realistic USAAF 5th Air Force internal memo. Dated the 25th of May 1943. Subject, re-evaluation of search and rescue SAR protocols. Northern Territory 1. The successful recovery of 4-4. Crewmen from B-24J-4273119. Darlin Dotty. By civilian personnel, after official SAR operations were suspended, necessitates an immediate review of our procedures. 2. The innovation was not technical, but human. The civilian party, led by Mr. Thomas Kendrick, utilized indigenous tracking techniques. It is the recommendation of this office that a formal liaison be established with these civilian specialists. The ability to read terrain is an asset we cannot afford to ignore. The innovation spread. Tom Kendrick was given a permanent RAAF fuel voucher and a high-frequency radio. Jackie and Albert were put on a retainer as official civilian guides. a classification that baffled the Army pay corps. The very next week, when a P-40 Warhawk went down near the Roper River, Brandt didn't scramble the Beauforters. His first call was to Kangaroo Creek Station. The success of the Dottie rescue fundamentally changed the Allied mindset in the top end. Tom's Method prototype was now formalized and immediately adapted. RAAF based Darwin. June 1943, the military did what the military does. It standardized the innovation. They created the Kendrick kit, a specialized SAR pack based on what Tom had carried. It was issued to every RAAF and USAAF forward base. The kit was a mix of old and new. Canvas water cooling bags replaced standard issue metal canteens. Bush-spec medical kits were added, containing more sulfur salt tablets and snakebite serum. Signal mirrors were issued, but with new training, flash at the horizon, not the sky. Most importantly, RAAF liaison officers were tasked with creating local guide registers, identifying and building relationships with station owners and indigenous elders across the territory. The innovation found new uses. The knowledge of Tom and his trackers wasn't just for rescue. When the USAAF needed to build a new, secret dispersal strip, they didn't consult maps. They asked Jackie and Albert where the hard ground was, and where to find water. The trackers led them to a hidden plateau and a soak that saved the engineers 3 months of drilling. But the enemy in the Outback was not static. The land always had a countermove. Arnhem Land Coast, July 1943. The wet season, the dry season. The enemy of heat gave way to the wet. The world changed. The red dust turned to a black, sucking ocean of mud. The rivers, which had been dry sand, became multi-mile wide torrents. The temperature dropped, but the humidity climbed to 100%. And the crocodiles, massive saltwater salties, emerged. A Catalina flying boat, misjudging the new coastline, clipped a mangrove and went down in a tidal flat. Tom, Jackie, and Albert were called. The truck was useless. "No truck, boss," Jackie said, staring at the grey, driving rain. "Big water, right," Tom said. "We'll need the flat bottom." The field modification was to abandon the truck entirely. They used Tom's 12-foot tin boat, normally for river fishing, strapping a small outboard motor to the back. Their enemy was no longer dehydration. It was drowning, infection, and the reptilian predators that now ruled the swamps. They found the crew huddled on the broken wing, the water rising with the tide. Crocodiles circling in the murky water, just yards away. The rescue was a tense, quiet nightmare. Pulling men from the wreck onto the tiny boat, with Albert in the bow. Using his spear to ward off an aggressive 15-foot salty, they had adapted. The method using local, specialized knowledge was the constant. The tools changed with the threat. The military, watching from Darwin, learned that in the Outback, the man on the ground or in the boat was always right. The success came at a price. Tom Kendrick's new role was not one he had asked for, and it pulled his world out of alignment. Kangaroo Creek Station, August 1943. Tom stood on his veranda, staring at his cattle. They were thin. The fences on the western boundary were down, and he'd lost 50 head to dingoes. His homestead, once meticulously maintained, was showing neglect. The bore, well at the north pasture, had a broken pump, and he hadn't had time to fix it. Kangaroo Creek Station was dying. He was saving American pilots, but he was losing his own life's work. His wife, Mary, a fictional character for this narrative, stood in the doorway. "Tom, you're one man. You can't fight their war and run this place. The north pasture is a dust bowl. They need me, Mary," he said, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "And we need you. What about Jackie and Albert? They haven't seen their families in a month. The Army's got them polishing boots at the RAAF base, waiting for orders." The moral consequence was a heavy weight. Tom had become part of the machine. The young men he saved, the ones he gave water to and splinted their legs, were patched up by military doctors and a week later sent back into the sky. He wasn't just saving lives, he was recycling them for the war effort. He saw them at the Basion, loud, brave boys from Ohio and Texas. Then he saw them when he pulled them from the wreckage, broken, weeping for their mothers. The contrast hollowed him out. A new conflict arose. A RAAF officer, a young, ambitious flight lieutenant, arrived at the station. "Mr. Kendrick, we're standardizing the Indigenous Guide program. We need Jackie and Albert to be ... well, uniformed. We've got boots for them, and they'll need to be quartered on base." Tom turned slowly. "Uniformed. For military discipline, you understand. You put boots on Jackie," Tom said, his voice dangerously quiet, "and you'll blind him. He reads the ground with his feet, you damn fool. You quarter him on a base, and you'll kill his spirit. He's not your soldier, he's Miali. He's a tracker. And he works with me, or he doesn't work at all. Now get off my property." The officer, stunned, retreated. Tom had won the battle, but he felt the new responsibility. He was now the protector, not just of his land, but of his men, caught between their ancient world and the all-consuming modern war. He was overextended, exhausted, and haunted by the faces of the men he couldn't save. Success had become a new kind of prison. Kangaroo Creek Station, -10, February 1944. 8:30, the war had moved on. General MacArthur's island-hopping campaign was in full swing. The Japanese presence in Timor had been neutralized. The great air battles had shifted north to New Guinea and the Philippines. RAAF-based Darwin was no longer the front line. It was becoming a rear-echelon supply depot. The big American bomber wings, the 5th and 13th Air Forces, were being reassigned. The Darwin Stubbies, as the Yanks had been known, were going home or going north. For Tom Kendrick, it meant silence. The radio was quiet. The sky was empty, save for the occasional RAAF transport. He, Jackie, and Albert were back to their real work. They were mustering cattle, fixing the broken bore pump, and mending the fences that had fallen during his service. Tom was on his horse, Gunner, 2 miles from the homestead, pushing a mob of stubborn bollocks through a dry gully. He was covered in dust, his hat pulled low. He was just a farmer again. Then he heard it. It wasn't the sound of a single, lost plane. It was a rumble, a deep, seismic vibration that he felt in his chest before he heard it with his ears. He reined in Gunner, the horse tossing its head nervously. Jackie and Albert, on their own horses, stopped beside him. "Boss," Jackie said, looking south. Tom looked first. It was just a dark line on the horizon. Then the line resolved itself. It was planes, not one, not a squadron, a fleet. They came from the south, from the direction of the inland bases. They were B-24 Liberators, dozens of them, 60, maybe 70, flying not in high-altitude combat formation, but in a massive, sprawling line, abreast. And they were low. They were flying at 1,000 feet. The thunder of nearly 300 engines shook the ground. The cattle below them scattered in panic. Tom, Jackie, and Albert just sat on their horses, staring up. The bombers were not on a course for Darwin. They were not on a course for anywhere. They were on a course for Tom's homestead. As the first wave passed directly overhead, the lead bomber, a new, shiny B-24, dipped its massive wings in a slow, graceful salute. Then the plane next to it dipped its wings, and the next, and the next. One after another, the entire 5th Bombardment Group, on their way to a new war, diverted their flight path. They flew over the tiny, tin-roofed house, over the broken-down Ford Ute, and over the 3 men on horseback who had taught them how to survive the land. The noise was deafening, a glorious, terrifying roar that drowned the world. It was the sound of the most powerful war machine on Earth, and it was a thank you. Colonel Brandt, in the lead plane, looked down at the tiny figures. He raised his hand to his headset microphone. "Godspeed, Mr. Kendrick." Godspeed. Tom Kendrick didn't move. He just watched them, his face impassive, until the last silver tailfin disappeared over the northern escarpment. He didn't wave. He just lifted his hat from his head and held it against his chest. The thunder faded. The silence of the outback rushed back in, leaving only the sound of the wind and the nervous stomping of the horses. "Reckon they're headed home," Tom said, his voice thick. "Big fellas," Albert said, nodding. Tom put his hat back on, pulling it low. "Right," he said, turning his horse back to the cattle. Let's get this mob moving. Darwin. Australia -1983. The archival footage is grainy. The colors faded to a nostalgic yellow. A 1980s television reporter, holding a microphone, is sitting on the veranda of the Kangaroo Creek homestead. Tom Kendrick passed away in 1972. The reporter narrates, his voice respectful. He's buried right here, under that ghost gum, overlooking the land he never left. His son David runs the station now. The camera pans to David, a man in his 50s, who has his father's blue eyes. Oh, he'd talk about it, if you asked, David says, a small smile on his face. He didn't think he'd done anything special. He always said, they were just men, and they were in my back paddock. You help a neighbor. To him, the Yanks were just neighbors, who lived a bit far away. The reporter continues, in the official histories of the 5th Air Force, there is no Kendrick kit. There is no formal mention of Tom or of Jackie Jungarai and Albert Berra-Rawanga, who are also gone now. The records simply state that SAR protocols were improved by civilian-military cooperation. But the stories are everywhere. The scene cuts to an interview at a VFW hall in San Diego, California. The man is old, his hands spotted, but his eyes are sharp. It's Frank Gallo, his name, Gallo says, his voice thick with emotion. Tom Kendrick, I'll never forget that name. Or those other two. Jackie and Albert. We were dead. The army had written us off. We were gone. And these 3 men, they walked out of the sun. They looked like they were from the Bible, and they gave us water. Gallo looks down, composing himself. That FLYOVER... ... You've heard about that? That was Colonel Brandt's idea. It wasn't on any order sheet. He got on the horn and told every pilot in the wing, we are making a detour. We burned thousands of gallons of fuel. Probably would have been shot for it if we'd lost a plane. He laughs, a dry bark. But every man in that sky, every one of us who had ever flown over that red hell, we knew what that man had done. He'd beaten it. He'd beaten the land. The flyover wasn't just for Tom. It was for them. The camera zooms in on a framed photo on Gallo's wall. It's a blurry, black and white snapshot. It shows Tom Kendrick, his arms crossed, standing by his truck. Beside him, unsmiling, are Jackie and Albert. The historian's voiceover closes the program. The war in the Pacific was won with aircraft carriers and bombers, with radar and with submarines. But in the vast, unforgiving heart of Australia, for a brief and vital time, the war was fought by 3 men, a broken-down truck, and a knowledge of the land as old as the continent itself. It was an innovation not of technology, but of translation. Tom, Kendrick, Jackie, and Albert didn't just find the lost pilots. They taught an army a new way to see. The final shot is a helicopter, Ariel, sweeping low over the Arnhem Land escarpment. The rock and scrub stretched to the horizon, red, ancient, and utterly indifferent. The land that almost won. The land that holds the secrets, silent and waiting.